I think that, I mean, you know, I'm very used now to working with instructions to unrehearsed guest performers, let's say. Because I mean, ever since 1999, I've been working like that, and it's always a kind of a duality between setting up very kind of defined aspirations for what you want to happen, and then being completely open to, you know, the possibility that you're going to be surprised by what happens, or that things deviate from the plan. And that really is the point, you know, the fact that there is that risk, and the fact that that the people who are investing in the moment, who are trying to kind of figure things out in the moment, really are discovering everything in that moment, and so that it's not a safe situation really, like that. On the other hand, it's like, you know, we're all able to listen and respond and do things. So theoretically, it's possible to kind of let this thing unfold in the way that apparently it's supposed to. But because we're in a situation like the Extra People, where, you know, it's not really obvious what you're doing things for, there isn't that kind of comfort of logical procedure in a way, you know. And for me, that's what I'm interested in with this piece, is in a way the absurdity of doing anything in that moment. And for me, that relates to various other things in the world, and it's kind of what the piece is working towards. Yeah, in many ways, it's a mood piece, I would say. There's a strange kind of mixture of like an almost obtuse rigidness that you might find in a warehouse, for example, like with a warehouse management system, like a very kind of blocky, do this, do that kind of feel, with the high visibility vests, the working lights going up. The opposite of what you would think of as like a dreamy environment. And yet, for me, what I've tried to do is, within that, like, just sort of shoot it through with this, with something like a dream, something that is, for me, actually very closely linked to a dream that I had. And actually, for me, when I'm dreaming, it's like that. I mean, the reality is completely banal, and yet something's not quite right, or, you know, it's just sort of, it's not like dreams are floaty, kind of ethereal, hallucinatory experiences. They're very down to earth most of the time. So that the piece is working on that, and of course it develops over time. It's not one thing. Like, one moment you could be maybe given the space to think and contemplate. In another moment, you could be really quite kind of stressing about where the light is that you're supposed to be finding, or like, how long am I going to be under this blanket for, or that sort of, you know, thing where you're not really thinking on widely. You're just really just dealing with the now. But hopefully it shifts between those things. That's what I'm aiming for, really. But the feeling is really the thing that I wanted to work on the most. It's like to allow for that strange combination of, I mean, it's the relationship with the voice above all, of course. I mean, there's only one voice in the piece, except for a few grunts here and there that you hear. But the voice is not just a kind of malevolent system, you know. It becomes something that gets close to you, and that is interested in your interiority, interested in that, and seems to kind of empathize in a way with your situation. It's not just a system voice. in the development of the piece, I watched it because it's important to know what's happening and whether it's working or not. And here, where it's presented in English and to people whose language is not is not English, it can get a little chaotic sometimes. So I need to watch it. But of course, I do that from a hidden place, and I'm the only one watching, because it's very important that people feel that they're alone with it. I mean, that's in a way the understanding is that it's an automated thing. It's the same with all my work. It's this basic thing of, like, if you're going to participate in something, the moment that there's somebody else obviously watching who's not in the same situation as you, the participation becomes very awkward. For me, I think a lot of the time when people say, "Oh, I hate participating in theatre," I completely understand them, because usually it's I mean, you know, the typical horror story is when the actor says, "I need one person," and everybody's safe from watching going, "Ha ha ha, that poor person." So it's always about establishing a kind of shared risk situation. That's what I'm trying to do most of the time with the auto theatre idea. That's basically one of the most important kind of protocols that I try and follow. The most important thing that needs to work is the lights, because if the lights get lost, or they're flashlights, right, and they end up in people's pockets, and then they're taken out. But if they stay in the pocket and that person doesn't understand that they're supposed to switch the light on, or if they put it down somewhere and then someone kicks it and it rolls off the stage or underneath something, then of course, if that happens to all 3 flashlights, then it's just dark and you can't see anything. So that's that's just a practical thing that I need to watch out for. Otherwise it's like, I don't mind if there's a couple of little problems, or somebody doesn't understand something. That's not like, I'm not like running on stage and saying, "Hey, you should have done that," It's just the basic things. And then there's the very first show, which is kind of, there's just some basic things that need to be set up in order for the whole of the rest of the evening to function, but that usually isn't true. It's difficult for this piece. It's not the most rewarding show to be showing, because I'm usually sort of stuck up there watching, and it's only really right at the end when I come down that I hear from the organisers or the people who are kind of greeting people in the door, what the reactions seem to be from the audience. And actually that's nice, because normally when you do a show, everybody claps and you can sort of judge what the reaction is from the applause, but I think that's in a way it's easy to misjudge that as well. And then people leave and it's this big mass all going out in one go, and it's very difficult to speak to more than a couple of people in that instance, I think. And whereas here, because people are coming out 15 by 15, it's actually, the people downstairs at least, they get quite a good idea of what people's reactions are, I think, and they feed that back to me later. So everything I was writing, I would be working with the voice, the text-to-speech voice that we use in the show, which is a child's voice. So you just highlight what you've written, and with a little keyboard shortcut, you listen to it. So it's like having the actor there the whole time. But if it doesn't sound right, then I'll maybe kind of put a comma in to change the intonation, or a question mark to make it sound like a question. You can put a question mark in the middle of the sentence, or I write something phonetically to spell it out, or actually to deliberately make it sound strange perhaps as well. So that whole process of writing was also one of kind of testing and performance at the same time, So the actual script itself is quite hard to understand, because it's written in such a strange way with all these kind of extra punctuations and commas and things. It's basically a program, but I think in a way a lot of writing is like that. I mean, even novel writing, it's technical in the end. We're going to look at that in the workshop I'm going to do in the next couple of days. It's like how do writers make images appear in your mind, for instance. There's ways, you know, like it's all about also how our brains are wired, like how our imagination works up there. I mean, you can make that analogy very easily, I think, with any kind of artistic creation. Yeah, actually, more and more my work is kind of edging towards some kind of more sort of socially engaged practice. The extra people did come from, you know, on the one hand, trying to hold on to a sort of dream I had of the theatre, and a vision that I had of the theatre as somewhere that is impossible to turn off, so that it's somehow never quite dormant. It's not possible. There's always some like sort of life in there, which happens as soon as you walk into it, which is triggered by being present there. But then on the other hand, it was really kind of, it came from a kind of anger regarding different kinds of powerlessness in the world, and I wanted to make a piece where it's I mean, this is risky in a way, but it's a sort of rehearsal for powerlessness, like you're trying on different modes of powerlessness, but also of a kind of renouncing of responsibility, where the roles where, like being an extra in a movie, where you say, yeah, I'm not expecting any focus here, I'm going to be patient, I don't need to know what the bigger picture is, that's not my job, just let me know what you want me to do and when. So that kind of base mode, and then taking it into other sort of instances of that. For example, bad working conditions, the sort of warehouse management systems that the same voice, the voices like that are used for. I got really interested in. And then there's these little hints at things like the migration crisis and this kind of thing. For me, it's certainly not as, I mean, from the sort of, I get worried in a way with press images of the extra people, because there it really looks like, oh, it's a show where you're dressing up as refugees, which is definitely not at all, I think, what the piece does when you're in it. It's much more, you know, these things just sort of come to the surface now and again, but it's not as explicit as that. But for me, it's important that those images suddenly appear when you're in it. But then for me also, that a lot is that and this is not explicit at all, but I have a lot of experience communicating with people with Alzheimer's, and this is something that always touches me very deeply. The kind of state that they end up in. The disease is so cruel that it really crushes you down to the point where you're just like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. So that if somebody speaks to you, there's this kind of like wide-eyed thing. It's like, is this for me? Am I supposed to do something? And there's something of that state which I see in those other modes that I've mentioned as well, and which I also know from work that I like, for example, by Beckett, that kind of thing. It's like, you know, so it's that mode which for me kind of resonates very strongly with a sort of condition that I'm interested in, that I feel like a lot of us are faced with. You know, we may not think of ourselves as particularly powerlessness, the audience that comes here. For sure, we know that there are many other people who are. But then again, if you look at how in the world everything is kind of run by, you know, politics and the economy, for example, most people don't really understand enough politics and economics to have proper agency over their lives. So if you look at it from that level, actually, we're sort of doing a similar thing, I think, most of us, of saying, you know, I don't really know what the bigger picture is, and I'm, you know, just an extra in that sense. Every time you try and translate something, you have that challenge, which is also a creative opportunity as well. You find new things. I mean, texturally, the most important and difficult thing to translate, I think, is the voice itself, because for me the identity of the piece is so bound up with this child, which is an Australian €15 download. It's like a tool that mostly used by children who can't speak, so they have touch screens. So everything is outputted using that voice, and it's quite a new phenomenon to have these child synthesized voices. It's not really that the voice is synthesized, it's more that the speech is synthesized, because it's based on recordings of an actual child. So there was a French one, they've done it in French, and the Portuguese one's going to be okay because the voice sounds like a child, especially if you just pitch it a little bit. But for Polish and Dutch, we had to use kind of more sort of corporate sounding voices, so that version was much more, in a way, like riffing on the weirdness of those corporate voices, the sort of voices you hear in the warehouses or maybe on telephone systems or stations, that kind of thing. And so we worked really on a different level there. And then in terms of language, I mean, I think it's just an enormous translation job, because there's so much text to translate, given that everybody's listening to different things. Yeah, I'm improvising all the time, of course. It depends what the terms are. I think that's the most important thing with these sort of, when you're talking about like instances of wanting to know what's happening and improvising, like the gap between aspiration and what you end up with as well. Like if it's what the terms are. I mean, I always think of it as in terms of my work, right from the start, it's this idea of a contract of goodwill, which is right outside any content of the piece. So, if I ask people to just follow instructions, as I do, and to try as hard as they can to follow them, and don't worry if you've messed up, just keep trying. That's pretty much the proposal behind all my work, and it's what I asked. The first time I asked somebody to do that was my friend in Paris in 1999. I asked him to. I figured it would be interesting to see this guy on stage, like just trying to do different things, and the audience hearing the instructions he was listening to as well at the same time. And it was really the same proposal. It was like, yeah, in a way it's not your fault if anything goes wrong, because as long as you're trying, then anything that can go wrong is actually going to be part of it. In a way, like, you end up with this sort of paradoxical situation where, like, if you agree to make mistakes, you can't go wrong. It's like how it ends up. And I like that. I mean, I like that sort of, to me it feels there's something quite human about it, in a way. And so that surrounding whatever chaos happens on stage, and it can also be antagonistic experience. Like sometimes the extra people, I think, is quite antagonistic. But surrounding all that is a contract of goodwill. Like for me, it's very important. I'm not trying to be unpleasant, as in the proposal. It's the opposite of that. It's trying to create a space for freedom, really, like a free space, which of course, art is and should be.